Senior Minister for International Monetary Cooperation and Deputy Minister of Finance Planning, Dr. Sarath Amunugama says that the failure to obtain a loan from the International Monetary Fund should not be viewed as a defeat. He points out that while the government's present need is to finance budgetary activities, such finance cannot be obtained from the IMF.
A book published by the Securities and Exchange Commission in the Sinhalese language for new investors entering the Colombo Stock Exchange was launched today under the patronage of Senior Minister Dr. Sarath Amunugama.
ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය අරමුදලෙන් දෙන සල්ලි එදිනෙදා ආයෝජනයකට ගන්න බෑ රජයකට. මහා බැංකුවේ තියෙන විදේශ විනිමය ප්‍රමාණය.
The government cannot use funds obtained from the International Monetary Fund for everyday investment. It is only a method to show up foreign reserves at the central bank. It cannot be used to buy dal and rice. We have reserves of 7 billion at present. The problem now is not adding another 1.5 billion and making it 8.5 billion. Our problem is financing the budget deficit. We cannot obtain this from the IMF and they will not grant it. It was said that it was a major defeat when the IMF refused to grant us the said finances. But in truth, there is no such thing. It was the IMF that came in first and said that we have used the $2.6 billion efficiently, and they asked if we would like an additional $1.5 billion. We did not need or want it. We receive foreign exchange from Sri Lankan expatriates, tourists and through trade.
උමනාවක් තිබුණේ නැහැ. විදේශ විනිමය දැන් අපිට එනවා. පිටරටවල වල වැඩ කරන අයගෙන් සංචාරක ව්‍යාපාරේ වෙළඳාමෙන් අපිට හම්බ වෙනවා.
Meanwhile, speaking at a media briefing convened today, IMF officials also commented on the discussion that has arisen around the government obtaining a loan from the IMF.
I think what we would like to see is a reform agenda that puts in place some strengthening of revenue measures and some ability for the budget to increasingly finance the development expenditures through domestic resources. And this is important for the country as a whole, to raise its domestic savings so that it finances these types of development expenditures. Now, in the context, again, I mean, let me just back up, the context of the overall government budget deficit of 5.8%, there's a very strong commitment by the authorities to reach that level of deficit financing. And in the context of Sri Lanka's access to financing, that we see at this point in time that there is not a need for IMF resources to be used to finance that deficit.
The IMF mission chief also expressed views regarding growth forecasts for Sri Lanka this year.
Real GDP growth, the IMF is now projecting, will pick up modestly this year to about 6.25% of GDP. The recovery will be constrained by the need to continue fiscal consolidation and to bring the budget down to around 5.8% of GDP. And we think that this is appropriate given still relatively high public sector debt levels. As well, inflation is high, as I mentioned, in the high single digits, and that will constrain the amount of space that monetary policy has for easing.